When an emergency hits, most people do the same thing. They rush to the roads, chase the same safe destinations, and leave huge parts of the city behind. And that creates something most people never notice: quiet, overbuilt places that suddenly become far more secure and useful than they look on a normal day. In this video, we're going through 30 locations that can function like fortresses when everyone else evacuates. Not fantasy bunkers, not movie stuff, and not anything illegal. This is about staying smart, staying calm, and knowing what to look for. Solid construction, controlled access, reliable shelter from weather, better sanitation, and the kind of infrastructure that keeps working when everything gets shaky. One quick rule before we start: always follow official instructions. If your area is under a mandatory evacuation, you leave. These locations are for situational awareness and legal permission-based options, so you can make better decisions fast instead of guessing under pressure. Location 1. Climate-controlled self-storage. A multi-story self-storage building is one of the few fortress-shaped places that a normal person can actually have legal access to before anything happens. That matters because the whole point of preparedness is reducing risk, not creating new problems. If you rent a small unit the normal way, you've already solved the hardest part: permission and a key code. In a wide disruption, especially when people are focused on leaving town, storage buildings often get ignored because they don't look like resources. Most units are just furniture, boxes, and forgotten stuff. That boredom factor is a real advantage. The buildings are usually built from concrete or concrete block, with limited windows, bright hallway lighting, metal roll-up doors, and controlled entry points. That's not a bunker, but it is sturdier and more controlled than most retail spaces. Climate-controlled facilities also tend to have better insulation and tighter construction, which helps with heat and cold swings. Another practical detail: these places are designed for moving heavy items, so you get wide corridors, loading areas, carts, and sometimes elevators. Even if you never plan to stay there, it can function as a legal cache for boring essentials: water, shelf-stable food, warm layers, basic hygiene, a battery radio, spare chargers, and copies of important documents sealed in waterproof bags. Keep it simple and rule-friendly. No prohibited items, no risky chemicals, no secret stash behavior that could get you kicked out. The beginner move is to treat it as redundancy. If your home is inaccessible for a day or two, or you can't safely travel across town, a nearby unit can buy you time and options without you doing anything sketchy. That same plain concrete box logic shows up again in the next location, but this time it's built for cars instead of storage units. Location 2. Multi-level parking garage. Parking structures don't look like survival assets, which is exactly why they can become calmer than you'd expect when everyone's attention is on highways and gas stations. Structurally, a modern garage is basically stacked reinforced concrete, designed to carry heavy loads and handle vibration. So that makes it relatively resilient to wind, debris, and the kind of chaotic street conditions that make open areas risky. It also has predictable geometry: ramps, columns, stair towers, and multiple exits. If you ever need short-term cover from weather or street congestion, a garage is one of the few large structures that's easy to navigate without getting lost. The key is to think temporary shelter and mobility, not move in. Ventilation is the big watch-out. Garages can trap exhaust and fumes, and in some situations they can collect smoke. If power is out, lighting may be limited, elevators won't work, and security gates might lock in place. Flooding is another real risk in underground levels, so the smarter mental model is upper or mid-levels, near stairwells, and only if it's clearly safe and you're allowed to be there. So in many cities, garages attached to hospitals, civic buildings, or large hotels are designed with better emergency signage and sturdier stair towers. Those stair towers matter because they're usually enclosed with fire-rated doors and more solid walls than the open parking decks. If you're building a beginner plan, the practical step is scouting what's already on your normal routes. Which garages are public, which ones have 24/7 access, where the stair exits are, and where the safe pedestrian routes lead once you step outside. Keep it non-dramatic. You're just learning your environment. If the storage facility is about private, legal redundancy, the garage is about quick cover and predictable movement. And if you like the idea of designed to survive fire and water, the next location takes that concept to an extreme. Location 3, Records Archive with fire-rated vault rooms. Records management facilities, title archives, and corporate document storage sites are built around one obsession: not losing paper. That sounds boring until you realize what they engineer for: fire resistance, water control, climate stability, and restricted access. Many of these buildings have dedicated vault rooms or fire-rated record rooms, basically a reinforced box inside the structure, because one major loss can trigger lawsuits, insurance disasters, and regulatory problems. In a situation where the general population is evacuating or chasing obvious supplies, these places are easy to overlook. They don't advertise food, medicine, or gear. They advertise filing, compliance, storage, and shredding. The important note is legal access. This isn't a go-take-it idea. It's a recognize-what-exists idea. If you run a small business, manage family documents, or work with legal records in any way, the preparedness angle is simple. Keep hardened copies of your critical documents in a legitimate storage service that already has fire-rated infrastructure. Birth certificates, IDs, insurance policies, property paperwork, medical summaries, and a list of emergency contacts, printed and sealed. When a crisis hits, people often realize too late that their entire life admin system lived in a single drawer at home. A records vault solves that problem by design. Also, these buildings tend to have stable humidity control, which is good for both paper and electronics. If you ever get access through work, contracts, or official arrangements, the fortress part is the construction and access control. Fewer windows, just serious doors, and interior layouts that don't invite casual wandering. The beginner takeaway is not find a vault. It's don't let your paperwork be fragile. Once you've got that mindset, you'll start noticing another class of buildings that are built the same way for a different reason. They keep networks alive. Location 4. Telecom central offices and switching buildings. Every city has a handful of windowless, low-profile telecom buildings that look like nothing from the outside. Plain walls, minimal signage, heavy doors, and serious fencing. Inside, they're built around uptime. That means backup power, battery banks, cooling systems, fire suppression, and controlled access. These sites often stay staffed or monitored longer than you'd expect because they're part of keeping phones and data moving. During an evacuation wave, most people don't even register them as places. They register them as infrastructure they drive past. That's why they can feel like fortresses. They're built to keep operating while the surrounding area goes weird. There's also a safety note here. You don't want to mess with these sites. They're critical infrastructure. They can be dangerous, and they're not public space. So the practical value is awareness, not entry. If you work in IT, facilities, security, utilities, or telecom contracting, you might already have legitimate reasons to be near or inside these places. For everyone else, the beginner move is simpler. Understand that communications reliability often clusters around hardened infrastructure. In some disruptions, cell service becomes spotty, not because the whole system is down, but because power and backhaul links fail unevenly. Knowing where the hardened nodes are can help you choose routes and meeting points that keep you connected longer, without doing anything illegal or risky. Another detail people miss. These buildings are usually built with strong physical security and limited public access roads, so the surrounding area can be quieter when crowds surge toward obvious retail. Again, this isn't a go there recommendation. It's a notice the map recommendation. That same built for uptime logic shows up again, but in a place you actually can interact with as a normal person. Broadcast stations. We're location 5, broadcast radio stations and transmitter sites. In a real emergency, the most valuable thing is often not gear, it's verified information. Broadcast radio stations, especially those with transmitter sites outside dense downtown areas, are built to keep transmitting through power issues. Many have generators, fuel contracts, hardened equipment rooms, and redundant systems because going offline is literally business failure. When people evacuate, they usually grab their phone and assume they'll stream updates. In a major outage, that plan collapses fast. Radio keeps working in situations where internet and cellular networks become unreliable. That's why broadcast infrastructure can feel like a fortress in the background. It's stable, protected, and designed to keep running. The preparedness angle is practical and beginner-friendly. Keep a simple battery or hand crank radio. Know the major local AM/FM emergency stations, and store those frequencies on paper. If you live in a region with storms, wildfires, or earthquakes, do a quick scan now and write down the stations that carry local government alerts. Also, understand that many transmitter sites are not places you should approach casually. They can have high voltage, restricted access, and security. Your win condition is receiving information, not showing up at the tower. If you're mapping fortress locations, think of broadcast sites as anchor points on the information layer of your plan. When things get chaotic, the people who can still hear updates don't have to guess. And once you're thinking about information as a survival resource, the next location becomes obvious. Tall buildings designed for observation and science. Location 6. University science buildings with rooftop equipment. Universities often have a few buildings that are sturdier, taller, and more operational than the average classroom block. Meteorology labs, atmospheric science buildings, astronomy departments, and engineering towers. The reason is simple: expensive equipment and the need for stable conditions. That tends to mean better construction, controlled access to certain floors, backup power for sensitive systems, and rooftop installations that require maintenance and security. In a situation where a large part of the population is leaving the city, campuses can become unusually quiet, especially outside the main dorm areas. And because these buildings don't scream supplies, they're not always the first place people crowd into. The fortress part here is less about hiding and more about capability, elevation, and awareness. From a high floor, you can see traffic flow changes, smoke plumes, weather shifts, and disruptions that are invisible at street level. Even a modest 10-story height can push your visual horizon out to roughly a dozen miles in clear conditions, which is a lot of situational awareness without any fancy tech. The beginner-safe version of this is not "go take a tower." It's know which buildings in your area have strong construction and clear signage, and know where official public spaces are on campuses, libraries, student centers, that may be open or used for organized sheltering. If you work or study there, your advantage is legitimate access and familiarity. You already know the stairwells, the emergency exits, and the layout. In a crisis, familiarity saves time and reduces mistakes. That same idea, using existing familiarity and legit access, gets even more practical in the next location, because it's built around tools and repair, not observation. Location 7. Community college trades and vocational workshops. If you want a fortress that's about keeping life functional, not just hiding, look at places built for skilled work. Community college trades buildings, vocational training centers, and technical institutes. These spaces are designed to teach welding, carpentry, electrical basics, HVAC, automotive work, and fabrication. That usually means concrete floors, industrial ventilation, strong power service, secured tool cages, and lots of storage. In an evacuation scenario, these campuses often empty out quickly because they're not residential hubs and they don't have obvious retail value. They're also typically in less crowded parts of town. The key advantage is maintenance capability. In longer disruptions, the people who can keep basic systems working, water handling, power management, repairs, safe heating and cooling, tend to stay stable while everyone else burns through supplies. A trades building is basically a concentrated how-to-fix-stuff environment. The YouTube-safe, real-world legal angle is, this is valuable if you're a student, staff member, or part of an official community response that has permission to use facilities. For beginners, the actionable move is skill-based, not location-based. Take a basic class, where even one semester of electrical fundamentals or basic tool safety changes how you see the world. You stop thinking in terms of products, and start thinking in terms of systems. Also, these buildings often have printed manuals, safety signage, and equipment documentation. In a long outage, paper knowledge is a real asset. If you're mapping resilience, put these on your list as repair hubs, not shelters. For shelter and calm, you want a place that the public already understands as a safe indoor space. Something like a main library. Location 8. Main public libraries. Libraries are quietly overbuilt compared to a lot of everyday buildings. They're designed for public occupancy, accessibility, fire code compliance, and heavy loads. Books are dense. Many newer libraries also have meeting rooms, emergency lighting, backup systems, and staff trained in basic public safety procedures. During evacuations, some libraries close, but in other scenarios, they become community coordination points because they're familiar, centrally located, and already set up for people to gather without instantly turning into a fight over merchandise. When streets get chaotic, the fortress quality of a library is calm, order, and structure. It's also one of the few places where information exists in physical form. Maps, local history, how-to books, printed directories, and sometimes even public notice boards with official updates. The beginner preparedness move is surprisingly simple. Know your nearest 2 libraries, and know the next nearest one outside your immediate neighborhood. Many people only think in circles around their home. A library network gives you options across the city. Another detail: libraries tend to have bathrooms, sinks, and basic facilities that matter when normal routines break. They also often sit near civic buildings, which means emergency services may prioritize the area sooner. The legal and safety note remains the same. You follow posted rules and official instructions. If a library is closed, you don't force anything. But if it's open or designated for public sheltering, it can be one of the safer indoor spaces available, especially for beginners who don't want to improvise. Once you've got libraries on the map, it's an easy step to an even larger public building type that's frequently used as an official shelter. Big civic halls and convention centers. Location 9. Convention centers and civic expo halls. Convention centers are built for crowds, logistics, and safety compliance. That means wide hallways, heavy doors, loading docks, large restrooms, industrial ventilation, and often significant backup power capacity. They're also designed to be reconfigured quickly. One week it's a trade show, next week it can be partitioned into smaller zones. In many real disasters, these buildings get used as organized shelters or staging areas because they can handle volume without collapsing into chaos instantly. When most people evacuate, the ones who remain often concentrate around official resources, and big civic buildings are where official resources can scale. The fortress element is not secrecy, it's infrastructure. These places often have commercial kitchens or catering hookups, see built-in PA systems, reliable signage, and staff or security routines that make movement more predictable. For a beginner prepper, predictability is valuable. It reduces the chance of making a bad decision under stress. The smart move is to look up your local emergency management plan now and see which facilities are listed as shelters or mass care sites. Many cities publish this information, and it's the most legal, least risky way to use a fortress during a crisis. Also note the external layout. Convention centers usually have big parking areas, multiple entrances, and wide roads around them, which helps with access even when smaller streets are blocked. The caution is that large shelters come with crowd issues, noise, stress, and limited privacy. That's why it's useful to have a second layer of options, places that offer more privacy and controlled access if you can arrange them legitimately. One of the most realistic versions of that is a building designed to host people every night, a hotel. Location 10. Interior corridor hotels. Hotels are basically pre-built, code-compliant shelter systems. Indoor corridors, private rooms, bathrooms, laundry capacity, food storage, and staff areas designed to keep the building running 24/7. In a mass evacuation, some hotels fill up fast, especially those directly on evacuation routes. But others, particularly business district hotels or conference hotels during sudden disruptions, can empty out quickly as people leave the area. The fortress quality here is layered safety. Controlled entry points, cameras, fire stairwells, and a layout that separates public lobby space from private floors. Many hotels also have backup generators for emergency lighting, elevators, sometimes limited, and critical systems because guest safety is a liability issue. A beginner-friendly approach is not to treat hotels as a fantasy hideout. Treat them as a planned, legal fallback. Know which hotels are near you, understand their cancellation policies, keep an emergency card with enough funds for a couple nights if possible, and know how to check in quickly with minimal hassle. If you travel for work or live in an urban core, hotels can be the simplest way to get a secure indoor room without improvising. Another useful detail is water. Hotels store a lot of water in their plumbing system and hot water tanks. That doesn't mean you do anything reckless with it, but it's one reason these buildings can stay habitable longer during disruptions. The caution is elevators and stairwells. Always be ready to use stairs safely, and avoid rooftops in high wind events. Hotels also connect naturally to the next quiet fortress category, places built around food production and safe handling, where sanitation is already baked into the workflow. Location 11. Commercial food commissaries and shared kitchens. A commercial commissary kitchen, sometimes called a shared kitchen, catering kitchen, or ghost kitchen facility, is designed for one thing: safe, high-volume food handling. That means stainless surfaces, floor drains, robust ventilation, multiple sinks, grease traps, fire suppression systems, and serious refrigeration. When people evacuate, these facilities can end up quiet because they're not obvious targets like supermarkets. Or they also tend to be in light industrial areas with lower foot traffic. The fortress factor is hygiene and systems. The building is set up to prevent contamination, and the staff areas are built around routines that keep food safe. In a disruption, that kind of infrastructure is more valuable than it sounds, because foodborne illness becomes a bigger risk when clean water and normal sanitation are disrupted. From a legal perspective, these facilities are valuable if you're an operator, renter, employee, or part of an organized community response. If you've ever thought about small-scale food business, even casually, having a legitimate relationship with a commissary can double as resilience. Many allow hourly rentals. That's not a survival trick, it's normal business. For beginners, the preparedness value is twofold. First, these buildings teach you what real sanitation looks like, not just wipe the counter. Second, they often sit near suppliers, packaging, dry goods, and distribution routes. The caution is that kitchens also have gas lines, hot surfaces, and fire risk. In a crisis, you don't improvise with fuel if you're not trained. You keep it safe, keep it simple, and follow facility rules. If you're thinking bigger than a kitchen, like where bulk food moves before it ever hits a store, the next location is where the supply chain actually lives. Distribution. Location 12. Wholesale grocery distribution centers. Grocery stores are the part everyone sees, so they get crowded first. Distribution centers are the part most people never think about, so they're often quieter and more controlled. A wholesale grocery distribution building is built for pallets, forklifts, cold zones, and strict inventory control. That usually means thick doors, loading docks, secured yards, industrial lighting, and heavy-duty power systems. The fortress element is partly physical and partly procedural. These places run on schedules and access control, not walk-in shopping. During evacuations, many may shut down or run skeleton crews, and they may have security that keeps crowds out. The beginner-safe takeaway is not go find one. It's understanding why they matter and what to do with that knowledge. Since if you or someone in your household works in logistics, trucking, warehousing, or food supply, that connection can become one of the most stabilizing assets you have. Because it's legitimate, it's role-based, and it comes with real-world know-how. It's also a reminder that preparedness isn't only about what's in your closet, it's also about skills and networks. Distribution centers also reveal a key concept: temperature control. In many disruptions, keeping food from spoiling is as important as getting food in the first place. That leads directly to the next location type, which can feel like a fortress simply because it's designed to keep cold air in and heat out. Location 13. cold storage and refrigerated warehouses. Cold storage facilities are built around insulation, sealed loading bays, and refrigeration systems that can run continuously. That means thick walls, heavy insulated doors, and often backup power planning, because a full freezer warehouse is a huge financial asset that can't just warm up. In an evacuation scenario, these places can be overlooked by the general public because they're not retail-facing and they don't advertise what's inside. The fortress quality is the building envelope. It's literally designed to resist outside temperature changes. Even if the power fails, a well-insulated cold room can hold temperature longer than people expect, especially if doors stay closed. That said, there's an important safety warning. Some industrial refrigeration systems use hazardous chemicals, including ammonia in certain setups. That's not something to experiment around. And it's not something a beginner should wander into. The smart, safe lens is, these facilities exist, they're structurally robust, and they tend to be controlled environments, but you only interact with them through legitimate roles and trained staff. If you work in food service, logistics, or facility maintenance, this is where your professional world overlaps with resilience. For everyone else, the beginner move is learning the principle. Insulation is survival. A small chest freezer at home, used safely and legally with backup power planning, is a mini version of what cold storage warehouses do at scale. Once you start noticing refrigeration infrastructure, you'll realize there's a more public-facing version in many cities that also has robust systems and big indoor space, ice rinks and arenas. Location 14, ice rinks and multi-use arenas. See, an ice rink is a strange kind of fortress because it's designed to manage air, humidity, and temperature at scale. The building usually has wide concourses, large restrooms, locker rooms, maintenance areas, and significant electrical service. Many arenas also have backup power capability for safety lighting and essential operations. During evacuations, these venues can either be closed and quiet or converted into organized sheltering spaces, depending on how local authorities respond. The advantage is space and infrastructure. It's already built for crowds, and it's built with strong internal zoning. The caution is similar to cold storage. The refrigeration plant area is not a place to mess around, and it can involve specialized systems. The beginner-safe approach is to treat rinks and arenas as potential official resources. See, not personal hideouts. Know where they are, know how to get there safely on foot or by alternate routes, and know what's nearby. Medical clinics, transit, police, fire. If you've ever volunteered at events, you also know these buildings have staff networks and procedures. In a real disruption, procedures matter. They reduce chaos. This is a good point to shift from big public buildings back to quiet industrial buildings that have strong sanitation and water handling, because water and cleanliness are the basics that keep any shelter stable. Breweries are a clean example of that, even if people usually only think about the product, not the infrastructure. Location 15, breweries and non-retail beverage production sites. A brewery or beverage production site is built around clean water, sanitation, controlled temperatures, stainless steel equipment, and strict cleaning routines. In a disruption, that sanitation culture is a real advantage. People tend to overlook these sites because they don't read as emergency supplies to the average person. They read as niche, optional, and recreational. The fortress element is the combination of tough materials, concrete floors, steel tanks, secure doors, and an internal layout designed to handle spills and heavy loads. If a large evacuation happens, especially away from downtown, some of these facilities can end up quiet simply because they're not on the first wave of people's mental map. The safe. So legal angle matters here. You don't use a production site unless you're authorized, employee, owner, invited staff, or part of an organized emergency response. From a beginner preparedness perspective, the useful lesson is what these places prioritize: water quality, cleaning, and process control. Even at home, copying that mindset makes you safer. Clean containers, clear labeling, rotating supplies, and avoiding mystery mixtures. Breweries also tend to have useful non-glamour features: floor drains, hoses, spare containers, and sometimes water filtration components. Don't treat any of that as something to take. treat it as a clue. The most resilient places usually look boring from the outside and system-heavy on the inside. If you want the same kind of advantage, but with a more direct link to hydration and storage, the next stop is where beverages get packaged and moved in bulk. Location 16. Bottling plants and beverage warehouses. Bottling and beverage distribution sites often have large indoor storage, loading docks, pallet racking, and strong forklift-friendly floors. They're designed for weight and movement, which usually means reinforced slabs, big doors, and controlled access. Some deal with water, some deal with soft drinks, and some handle a mix of products. In a mass evacuation, these facilities can be quiet because they're not shopping destinations, and they're usually located away from dense residential areas. The fortress quality is again about structure and logistics. Large secure doors, fenced perimeters, lots of indoor space that can stay dry, and an internal flow designed to prevent bottlenecks. For preparedness beginners, the safest takeaway is understanding storage basics. Stacked goods need stable temperature, pest control, and dry conditions. Bottling plants are basically a masterclass in warehousing done right. If you work in distribution, this is a natural point where professional access and resilience overlap. If you don't, the practical action is still useful. Notice where these warehouses are and what routes lead to them, because in many emergencies, the most functional areas are light industrial zones with good road access and fewer crowds. Also, beverage warehouses tend to have packaging materials, cardboard, shrink wrap, pallets, that become useful for moving and organizing supplies if you're operating legally within the facility. Once you're thinking about food and water systems, it's hard not to notice the next location type that's literally built to produce food: controlled growing environments. Location 17. Commercial greenhouses and hydroponic facilities. Commercial greenhouses, nurseries, and hydroponic grow sites are designed to keep plants alive through temperature swings, pests, and inconsistent weather. That means controlled environments, water storage, irrigation systems, backup planning for heat and ventilation, and lots of practical supplies like trays, shelving, hoses, and repair parts. In an evacuation scenario, these places can be overlooked because they're not immediate survival in most people's minds. They think of groceries, not growing. The fortress part is twofold. First, these structures often have fenced lots and controlled access because inventory is expensive, and theft is common even in normal times. Second, the people who run them understand life support systems in a very literal way: airflow, water flow, nutrient balance, and pest control. For beginners, the biggest advantage is learning what's real and what's fantasy about food. Growing takes time, routine, and stable water. A greenhouse shows you what it actually looks like. The legal preparedness move is relationship-based. Buy from local nurseries. Talk to staff. Learn what grows in your climate, and consider small-scale growing at home. Even a basic balcony setup teaches you timing and failure points. Another practical benefit, nurseries often stock non-food essentials that still matter in disruptions: tarps, buckets, hand tools, gloves, twine, and soil amendments. Again, you don't raid anything. You build knowledge and legitimate access in advance. Once you connect food production to real-world supplies, the next location makes sense. Places that store the inputs for growing and basic repairs, seed and farm supply hubs. Location 18. Farm co-ops, feed stores, and seed suppliers. Even inside or near cities, there are agricultural supply stores, feed and seed shops, farm co-ops, irrigation suppliers, and fencing outlets. They can look old-fashioned, but they're often packed with practical items that remain useful when regular retail is disrupted. Seeds, animal feed, hand tools, work gloves, rope, fencing materials, basic hardware, and sometimes water storage containers. In a mass evacuation, these stores can be quieter than big box retail because they're not the first stop for people who don't already do any growing. The fortress quality is often physical. These places may have metal buildings, secure back rooms, and staff who take theft seriously. The bigger advantage is that they sit at the edge of two worlds: urban convenience and rural practicality. So for beginners, they're a reality check. They teach you what supplies are actually needed to produce food or maintain outdoor systems. They also teach you that seeds aren't a magic token. You need soil, timing, water, and protection. A good preparedness habit is learning which seed varieties do well locally and storing them properly. Another beginner move is focusing on non-glamour items: gloves, fasteners, rope, buckets, and repair supplies. Those are the things people regret not having when normal life breaks down for a week. And if you want to keep a group stable indoors, you quickly learn that hygiene and clean fabric aren't luxury, they're prevention. That's where the next location comes in: industrial scale laundry. Location 19. Industrial laundry and linen service facilities. Industrial laundries are built around sanitation, heat, safe water, and workflow. They handle uniforms, hotel sheets, hospital linens, restaurant textiles, and sometimes protective workwear. The buildings usually have concrete floors, big drainage systems, commercial boilers or water heaters, strong electrical service, ventilation, and stockrooms full of linens and basic supplies. In an evacuation wave, these facilities can become quiet because they're not obvious shopping targets. Most people don't connect clean linens to survival until they're living without normal services. The fortress element is the infrastructure: large indoor work areas, controlled access, and systems that are meant to keep functioning. The beginner prep lesson is straightforward. Cleanliness prevents problems. Skin infections, minor wounds getting worse, and illness spread are all more likely when laundry and showers stop. An industrial laundry shows you the scale of what staying clean really requires. The legal access point here is again work and community roles. If you're in hospitality, healthcare, or facility management, this is a natural overlap. For everyone else, the safer takeaway is planning your own household laundry resilience. Extra soap, a way to hand wash safely, and enough spare clothing to reduce urgency. Industrial sites also tend to have carts, shelving, and packaging supplies that make organization easier if you're operating there legitimately. This ties neatly into a smaller, more common version that exists in almost every neighborhood and stays relevant even in minor disruptions: the laundromat. Location 20. Yes, neighborhood laundromats. A laundromat is not a fortress in the dramatic sense, but it can become a surprisingly stable node during short disruptions, especially when people evacuate and local foot traffic drops. The reason is simple: it's built for water flow, drainage, and heat. Those three things matter more than most beginners expect. Laundromats often have reinforced floors, multiple machines that can run off a solid electrical feed, big sinks, seating, and sometimes vending or small storage rooms. In some areas, they also have generators, or can bring them in quickly, because staying operational is good business. The safety notes are basic but important. Don't run machines if the power is unstable. Don't overload outlets, and don't ignore ventilation. The preparedness use case is practical and legal. If you're stuck in a city during a disruption, and you need to keep clothing and linens clean, a functioning laundromat is one of the most straightforward options. It also becomes an information point, because people talk there and notices get posted. For beginners, the move is to know 2 laundromats, the closest one, and one that's on a different water/power feed area. Cities often have uneven outages. Another beginner step is having a small laundry kit in your car, or go bag, detergent sheets or small detergent bottle, a few quarters or alternate payment method, a compact clothesline, and a couple of heavy-duty trash bags, useful for carrying and keeping items dry. If laundromats are the water and heat version of resilience, the next location is the water and drainage version that's often built like a concrete bunker: self-service car washes. Location 21. Self-service car wash bays. Self-service car washes are tough by design. Concrete walls, wet floors, big drains, and equipment that's meant to survive constant water exposure. They're usually invisible, easy to find spots, but in an evacuation scenario, they can be oddly empty because they're not a priority destination. The fortress quality is the structure and the layout. Individual bays provide separation from wind and flying debris, and the equipment rooms are typically locked and reinforced because theft and vandalism are common. The practical angle is not live there, it's know what it's good for. In many disruptions, the ability to rinse mud, chemicals, or grime off gear, and to do it in a place built to manage wastewater, can be useful. Car washes also often have bright lighting, which can make the area feel safer than a dark side street. The safety warnings matter. Wet concrete is slippery, chemical residue can be irritating, and you don't want to be around malfunctioning electrical systems in a wet environment. As a beginner, treat it as a temporary utility node, not a base. If you're mapping your city, mark the ones that are in quieter commercial strips rather than right next to high-traffic retail. Also note which ones have 24/7 access and which ones shut down at night. If you like the idea of utility nodes, the next location is about the most underrated utility in a prolonged disruption: keeping indoor air comfortable and safe, and repairing the systems that do it. Location 22, HVAC and refrigeration repair shops. Commercial HVAC and refrigeration shops are where comfort becomes engineering. Tools, parts, shift diagnostics, motors, fans, compressors, copper tubing, wiring, fasteners, and manuals. These places often have concrete block walls, big rolling doors, secured yards, and interior work bays designed for heavy equipment. In evacuation-heavy scenarios, they can be quiet because they're not obvious targets for the general public. The fortress aspect is partly physical and partly functional. Physical, solid construction, fewer windows, serious locks. Functional, the ability to maintain and repair systems that keep people alive in heat or cold, without relying on a perfect supply chain. For beginners, the smartest way to use this idea is skill first and legal first. If you work in the trades, your job is already a preparedness multiplier. If you don't, you can still learn the basics: how ventilation works, how to safely seal drafts, how to avoid carbon monoxide risk, and how to keep a space livable without improvising dangerous heat sources. HVAC shops also tend to have excellent organizational systems: bins, shelves, labeled parts that show you what real inventory management looks like. That's a quiet prep skill people skip. You don't need more stuff. You need to know what you have and where it is. If the HVAC shop is the repair brain, the next location is the power nerve. The places that store the boring components that make electricity safe and usable. Location 23, electrical supply houses and solar installer warehouses. An electrical supply house is a warehouse of civilization's small parts: breakers, conduit, junction boxes, wire spools, connectors, fuses, nice lighting, batteries, in some cases, and sometimes solar-related hardware through contractors. These places can look unremarkable from the street, but inside they're built for organized, controlled inventory. During evacuations, they may shut down quickly, and they aren't on the average person's shopping map, which can leave them quieter than retail. The fortress quality is again structure plus access control, reinforced storage, locked cages, and staff who treat safety seriously, because electrical gear can be hazardous. This is not a place for casual improvisation. The beginner safe value is recognizing how power actually gets managed, not with one magical generator, but with correct wiring, protection, and load planning. If you've ever seen someone overload an extension cord, you already know why this matters. The realistic preparedness move is relationship-based. If you're doing legitimate home improvements, learn from professionals and buy the right gear. If you're considering a small solar backup system in the future, understanding basic components, battery safety, inverters, fuses, keeps you from making expensive mistakes. And in a crisis, safe power is safer than more power. If you want a location that bridges tools, power, and short-term practicality without requiring specialized trade access, the next one is a place many people already use in normal life: tool rental yards. Location 21, self-service car wash bays. Self-service car washes are tough by design. Concrete walls, wet floors, big drains, and equipment that's meant to survive constant water exposure. They're usually invisible, easy to find spots, but in an evacuation scenario, they can be oddly empty because they're not a priority destination. The fortress quality is the structure and the layout. Individual bays provide separation from wind and flying debris, and the equipment rooms are typically locked and reinforced because theft and vandalism are common. The practical angle is not live there, it's know what it's good for. In many disruptions, the ability to rinse mud, chemicals, or grime off gear, and to do it in a place built to manage wastewater, can be useful. Car washes also often have bright lighting, which can make the area feel safer than a dark side street. The safety warnings matter. Wet concrete is slippery, chemical residue can be irritating, and you don't want to be around malfunctioning electrical systems in a wet environment. As a beginner, treat it as a temporary utility node, not a base. If you're mapping your city, mark the ones that are in quieter commercial strips rather than right next to high-traffic retail. Also note which ones have 24/7 access and which ones shut down at night. If you like the idea of utility nodes, the next location is about the most underrated utility in a prolonged disruption: keeping indoor air comfortable and safe, and repairing the systems that do it. Location 22, HVAC and refrigeration repair shops. Commercial HVAC and refrigeration shops are where comfort becomes engineering. Tools, parts, shift diagnostics, motors, fans, compressors, copper tubing, wiring, fasteners, and manuals. These places often have concrete block walls, big rolling doors, secured yards, and interior work bays designed for heavy equipment. In evacuation-heavy scenarios, they can be quiet because they're not obvious targets for the general public. The fortress aspect is partly physical and partly functional. Physical, solid construction, fewer windows, serious locks. Functional, the ability to maintain and repair systems that keep people alive in heat or cold, without relying on a perfect supply chain. For beginners, the smartest way to use this idea is skill first and legal first. If you work in the trades, your job is already a preparedness multiplier. If you don't, you can still learn the basics: how ventilation works, how to safely seal drafts, how to avoid carbon monoxide risk, and how to keep a space livable without improvising dangerous heat sources. HVAC shops also tend to have excellent organizational systems: bins, shelves, labeled parts that show you what real inventory management looks like. That's a quiet prep skill people skip. You don't need more stuff. You need to know what you have and where it is. If the HVAC shop is the repair brain, the next location is the power nerve. The places that store the boring components that make electricity safe and usable. Location 23, electrical supply houses and solar installer warehouses. An electrical supply house is a warehouse of civilization's small parts: breakers, conduit, junction boxes, wire spools, connectors, fuses. Nice lighting, batteries, in some cases, and sometimes solar-related hardware through contractors. These places can look unremarkable from the street, but inside they're built for organized, controlled inventory. During evacuations, they may shut down quickly, and they aren't on the average person's shopping map, which can leave them quieter than retail. The fortress quality is again structure plus access control, reinforced storage, locked cages, and staff who treat safety seriously, because electrical gear can be hazardous. This is not a place for casual improvisation. The beginner safe value is recognizing how power actually gets managed, not with one magical generator, but with correct wiring, protection, and load planning. If you've ever seen someone overload an extension cord, you already know why this matters. The realistic preparedness move is relationship-based. If you're doing legitimate home improvements, learn from professionals and buy the right gear. If you're considering a small solar backup system in the future, understanding basic components, battery safety, inverters, fuses, keeps you from making expensive mistakes. And in a crisis, safe power is safer than more power. If you want a location that bridges tools, power, and short-term practicality without requiring specialized trade access, the next one is a place many people already use in normal life: tool rental yards. Location 27, marinas and boatyards with secure docks. Marinas can become surprisingly calm during certain evacuations, especially when people are rushing out by car and focusing on roads. A marina is built around controlled access: gates, docks, staff areas, utility pedestals, power and water, storage sheds, and maintenance zones. Many also have security routines because theft is a known problem. The fortress element is the perimeter and the controlled entry, plus the fact that docks are physically awkward for crowds to move through quickly. For beginners, this location is only relevant if you have legitimate ties. You own a boat, you rent a slip, you work there, or you have friends or family who do. If you do have that access, the preparedness value is clear. A boat is a self-contained shelter platform with storage and mobility. But it's not an automatic solution. Water adds risk, weather exposure, cold water hazards, and the need for strong safety habits. Also, in many emergencies, authorities restrict waterfront access. So the smart framing is, marinas are an option layer, not the plan for everyone. Even without a boat, marinas teach useful things. How to store gear against moisture, how to secure access, and how to think about redundancy. Spare lines, spare power, backups. If you like the idea of secure lots and stored mobility but don't deal with water, the next location is the land version, RV and boat storage yards. Location 28, RV and boat storage yards. Storage yards for RVs, boats, and trailers are usually built like low-profile fortresses, fenced perimeters, controlled gates, wide lanes, cameras, and minimal foot traffic. During evacuations, these places can be ignored because they're not on the mental map of where supplies are. The fortress quality is obvious. It's already a secured yard. For beginners, this is another location that only matters if you have legitimate access, because you rent a space there, own an RV stored there, or work there. If you do, it can be a major resilience asset. An RV is basically a small, mobile shelter with water storage, a place to sleep, and built-in systems. But it also requires maintenance, fuel planning, and safe operation. The practical preparedness move is routine. Keep it maintained. Keep paperwork current. Keep a small set of essentials inside, and don't rely on last-minute fixes. Storage yards can also serve as a staging point if you need to relocate in an organized way. Instead of trying to load everything at home on a crowded street, you can move in stages if rules and conditions allow. The caution is security and legality. Storage yards have staff, contracts, and rules for a reason. You don't want to be the person who creates trouble in a place that could otherwise be a calm asset. If you're thinking about large, secured facilities with equipment and strong structure, the next location is one of the biggest fortress-by-design environments in any city, though it's usually only accessible through work. Transit maintenance depots. Location 29. Transit maintenance depots and fleet garages. Bus depots, rail maintenance yards, and fleet garages are built for heavy vehicles, long shifts, and continuous operations. That means large indoor bays, deep concrete floors, secured perimeters, on-site parts storage, industrial lighting, and often backup planning, because transit is a public necessity. In evacuation scenarios, public transit can either get overwhelmed or shut down in phases, and maintenance facilities can become quiet in a way that surprises people, especially if the public-facing stations get all the attention. The fortress quality is the combination of perimeter security and industrial capability. Tools, lifts, compressors, storage space, and staff who understand systems. The legal access point is clear. If you work in transit, fleet management, is municipal services, or contract maintenance, you may have legitimate reasons to be there. If you don't, this is a map awareness location, not a destination. These sites can also involve hazardous materials and high-risk equipment, so casual entry is unsafe even before legality becomes an issue. For beginners, the useful lesson is that cities have hidden layers of resilience built into maintenance culture. The people who keep buses running and tracks safe are the same kind of people who keep communities functional during disruptions. If you want to build real preparedness, learning basic maintenance habits, checking batteries, keeping tires safe, keeping tools organized, understanding how to read warning labels, puts you closer to that mindset. And that leads into the final location, which isn't a separate building at all, but a specific part of many modern buildings that acts like a built-in safety backbone. Location 30, high-rise stairwells, and the mechanical core. In many modern multi-story buildings, offices, hotels, hospitals, apartment towers, the most fortress-like area isn't the lobby or the windows. It's the core, enclosed stairwells, utility risers, and the mechanical floors that are designed to keep the building functioning safely. These stairwells are usually built with fire-rated materials, heavy self-closing doors, and clear signage. They exist so people can move even when elevators fail, smoke is present elsewhere, or power is unstable. In an evacuation wave, the public areas of a building can become chaotic, but the stair core often stays relatively controlled because it's not a destination, it's a pathway. The preparedness value here is highly beginner-friendly because it doesn't require any extreme scenario and it doesn't require any questionable behavior. It's simply learning your exits. If you spend time in a workplace, a school, a gym, or a high-rise residential building, you should know where the nearest 2 stairwells are, which doors lead to the outside, and where those exits come out at street level. You should also know what not to do. Don't use elevators during earthquakes or fires. Don't block doors open if the building's safety plan says they must stay closed. And don't go onto rooftops in high winds. The mechanical core concept is also a mental model. The safest spaces are often the most boring ones, built for codes and maintenance rather than comfort. When you understand that, should you start spotting resilience everywhere. Thick walls, controlled access, clear signage, backup lighting, and predictable movement routes. And you make faster, safer decisions without needing drama, panic, or guesswork.